Elon Musk stood in line at a small Taco Bell in Los Angeles, blending in with the lunchtime crowd like an ordinary guy. Wearing a simple hoodie and jeans, he waited patiently, scrolling through his phone. The faint sound of whispers caught his attention. A pair of teenage boys just a few steps behind him were talking in hushed tones, but their words carried a weight that made him freeze mid-scroll. "Can you believe that's him?" one boy said, his voice shaking with awe. "Yeah," the other replied, barely audible. "But what's he even doing here? Billionaires don't eat tacos like us." Elon shifted slightly, his ears catching every word. He turned his head just enough to see them, two young boys, no older than 15, wearing clothes that seemed a little too worn and sneakers with frayed laces. Their eyes darted between him and the ground, as if they couldn't decide whether to speak up or stay silent. Before I continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss stories like this, ones that reveal the extraordinary moments behind the world's most influential man. The cashier's voice broke the tension. Next in line. Elon stepped forward, his usual confidence overshadowed by curiosity about the boys behind him. What were they whispering about? He placed his order, but his mind was somewhere else. "Just a couple of tacos and a large soda," Elon said casually. But as he handed over his card, he glanced back. The boys were now staring at the menu board, their expressions tense. He noticed something odd. One of them had a small coin pouch in his hand, and the other was counting what looked like a handful of crumpled dollar bills. Something didn't sit right with Elon. Were they just shy? Or was there something more to their quiet exchange? He took his tray of food and moved to a table near the corner, deliberately choosing a spot where he could still observe the boys. As they stepped up to the counter, their voices grew quieter, almost as if they were embarrassed. We'll just share one taco," one of them finally said, avoiding eye contact with the cashier. Elon's heart sank. Share one taco? He had heard enough. Folding his napkin neatly, he stood up and walked toward the counter, his footsteps deliberate but unassuming. "Excuse me," Elon said, his voice calm but commanding. The boys turned to face him, their faces pale with a mix of shock and confusion. "Why don't you let me take care of this for you?" Their eyes widened. "No, we can't. We're fine," one of them stammered, but the hunger in their eyes betrayed their words. "Listen," Elon interrupted gently, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I insist." He turned to the cashier. "Give them whatever they want. Add dessert too." The cashier nodded, stunned, while the boys looked at each other, disbelief written all over their faces. Elon smiled faintly. "You don't need to explain," he said. "I've been in tough spots too. Consider it a favor you can pass on someday." But what Elon didn't know was that this small gesture was about to lead to something far bigger, a twist that neither he nor the boys could have imagined. The boys hesitated for a moment, their pride battling with their hunger. But when the smell of sizzling tacos wafted through the air, they couldn't resist. "Thank you, sir," one of them finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. The other nodded silently, his eyes glistening. The cashier quickly assembled their order: tacos, burritos, a couple of sodas, and churros for dessert. Elon stepped back, watching as the boys accepted the tray. But it wasn't their gratitude that struck him. It was the way they clung to each other, like brothers bound by something deeper than blood. They carried their food to a corner table, whispering among themselves. Elon couldn't hear what they were saying, but he noticed one of them sneaking glances in his direction. Something was clearly on their minds. Elon picked up his soda and casually strolled over to their table. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his tone light. The boys looked at each other, wide-eyed. Sure," the older one said hesitantly, scooting over to make room. As Elon sat down, he noticed the younger boy fidgeting with a worn-out backpack. Its seams were fraying, and a few school books peeked out from the unzipped top. "You guys in school?" Elon asked, taking a sip of his drink. "Yeah," the older boy replied. "Well, kind of. We don't go every day." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" The younger boy finally spoke up, his voice soft but steady. "We have to work sometimes. My brother does deliveries after school, and I help when I can." Elon leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Deliveries? That's a lot to handle." What about your parents? The room seemed to grow quieter as the boys exchanged a glance. The older one took a deep breath. It's just us, he said. Our mom passed away last year. Dad, he left a long time ago. Elon felt a lump in his throat. He had faced his share of challenges, but hearing this was a stark reminder of the resilience some people carried just to survive. That's tough, he said, his voice softening. But you're sticking together. That's what matters. The boys nodded, their guarded expressions hinting at stories they weren't ready to share. But just as the moment began to settle, the younger boy reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. We've been working on something, he said hesitantly, sliding it across the table. Elon unfolded the paper to find a hand-drawn blueprint of some sort of device. It was messy, with scribbled notes and uneven lines, but the idea behind it was unmistakably creative. What's this? Elon asked, genuinely intrigued. It's a prototype, the older boy said, his voice growing more confident. For a drone that can deliver stuff faster than bikes. We've been trying to build it with scraps from junkyards. Elon stared at the drawing, his mind racing. It was rough, sure, but the concept was solid. These kids weren't just trying to make ends meet. They were dreamers, innovators in their own right. But what they didn't know was that their lives were about to change forever. Elon wasn't just interested in their idea. He saw something in them that reminded him of himself. A spark, a hunger to create. As he folded the paper carefully and slid it back, he smiled. You know, he said, leaning back in his chair, this might just be the start of something incredible. And that's when the younger boy said something that stopped Elon cold. We just needed someone to believe in us. Elon sat there for a moment, those words echoing in his mind. We just needed someone to believe in us. It struck a chord deep within him. He had heard those same words in his own head many years ago, back when he was building companies from scratch, struggling to convince the world that his ideas weren't crazy. I know how that feels, Elon said finally, his voice steady but filled with emotion. When I started out, nobody believed in me either. But here's the thing. It only takes one person to change everything. The boys listened intently, their expressions shifting from guarded to hopeful. Elon leaned forward, his eyes locking onto theirs. What if I told you I could help? The older boy blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Help how? Well, Elon said with a small grin. For starters, you won't have to dig through junkyards anymore. I know a place with all the tools and materials you'd ever need to build your drone, and then some. The younger boy's jaw dropped. You mean like a workshop? More than that, Elon replied. A lab. A place where you can test your ideas, make mistakes, and figure things out. I can arrange it. The boys exchanged looks, their disbelief evident. The older one hesitated. Why would you do that for us? You don't even know us. Elon leaned back in his chair, his smile fading into something more serious. Because someone once gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it, he said. And I wouldn't be here today if they hadn't. Now it's my turn to pass that on. The room seemed to buzz with an invisible energy, a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The older boy rubbed the back of his neck, struggling to process what was happening. We'd have to leave our jobs, he said cautiously. We depend on that money. Elon nodded, understanding the weight of their situation. That's fair. Tell you what, I'll cover your expenses. Rent, food, school supplies, whatever you need. Think of it as an investment in your future. You just focus on building that drone. The boys sat frozen, unable to speak. It was the kind of offer that seemed too good to be true, but the sincerity in Elon's eyes made it hard to doubt him. Finally, the younger boy broke the silence. Are you serious? Dead serious, Elon replied. But there's one condition. Both boys straightened up, their curiosity piqued. What's the condition? The older one asked. You have to promise me something, Elon said, leaning in. When you succeed, and trust me, you will, you have to pay it forward. Help someone else the way I'm helping you. The boys nodded slowly, their expressions shifting to determination. We promise, the older one said firmly. Good, Elon said, standing up. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Let's get this started. But just as he was about to leave, a man in a suit walked into the Taco Bell, his sharp gaze scanning the room. He locked eyes with Elon and marched straight toward him. Elon, the man said urgently, we have a situation at SpaceX. You need to come now. Elon frowned, glancing back at the boys. He hesitated for a moment, then said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Wait for me outside. The man nodded and left. Elon turned back to the boys, pulling a card from his pocket and sliding it across the table. Call this number tonight, he said. We'll get everything arranged. As he walked out the door, the boys stared at the card, their hands trembling. They had no idea that the next chapter of their lives was about to unfold in ways they couldn't begin to imagine. Later that evening, the boys sat in their cramped apartment, the card lying on the small, scratched coffee table between them. It felt like a ticket to another world, something too surreal to be real. The younger boy, Danny, picked it up, turning it over in his hands. Do you think this is really happening? His brother, Marcus, stared at the card thoughtfully. I don't know, he admitted. But people like Elon Musk don't make empty promises. If he said he'll help us, I think he means it. Danny nodded, though he still couldn't shake the disbelief. What if it's some kind of test? Like, he wants to see if we're serious. Then we show him we are, Marcus replied firmly. He grabbed the old notebook they had used to sketch out their drone plans, flipping through pages filled with messy handwriting and diagrams. This is everything we've worked for. If this is our chance, we can't waste it. Danny hesitated for a moment before picking up the phone. With trembling fingers, he dialed the number on the card. It rang twice before a calm, professional voice answered. Musk Innovations, how may I assist you? Danny froze, suddenly unsure what to say. Marcus leaned in, whispering, just tell them who you are. Hi, Danny stammered. My name is Danny. Elon Musk told us to call this number. There was a brief pause, followed by a shift in tone. Mr. Musk mentioned you, the voice said warmly. Please hold for a moment. The line clicked, and then another voice came on. This one was direct, authoritative, yet friendly. Danny, this is Sarah. I'm one of Elon's assistants. He told me about you and your brother. We're setting up everything you'll need, but first, I'd like to know more about your project. Danny glanced nervously at Marcus, who gave him an encouraging nod. It's a drone, Danny explained, but it's not just a regular drone. We're designing it to detect natural disasters before they happen, like earthquakes or floods. It uses sensors and AI to predict patterns. There was a pause, and Danny's heart raced. Then Sarah's voice returned, impressed. That's an ambitious idea, she said, and exactly the kind of innovation Mr. Musk loves. Can you be in the city tomorrow morning? We'll arrange for transportation. Danny's mouth fell open, and he fumbled for words. Yes. We can be there. Good, Sarah replied. I'll text you the details. Welcome aboard. As the call ended, the brothers sat in stunned silence. Marcus finally broke it with a laugh. Did she just say, welcome aboard? Danny grinned. I think she did. The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside their apartment. The driver, a sharply dressed man, opened the door with a polite nod. Mr. Danny and Mr. Marcus? That's us, Marcus said, still half disbelieving as they climbed in. The ride to the city felt like entering another world. Skyscrapers loomed overhead, and the car eventually stopped in front of a massive, futuristic building with Musk Innovations etched in bold letters above the entrance. Inside, Sarah greeted them warmly, leading them to a state-of-the-art lab. This is where you'll be working, she said, gesturing to the spacious room filled with cutting-edge equipment. Everything you need is here. And if you need anything else, just ask. Danny and Marcus exchanged a look, their excitement barely contained. But as they stepped further into the lab, they noticed something, or rather, someone, watching them from the corner. It was a man in a lab coat, his expression unreadable. He walked over, his eyes scanning them critically. You're the kids Elon's betting on? He asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Marcus stood his ground, meeting the man's gaze. We are, and we won't let him down. The man smirked. We'll see about that, he said before turning and walking away. The tension hung in the air, but it only fueled the brothers' determination. They knew they had to prove themselves, not just to Elon, but to everyone who doubted them. What they didn't know was that the road ahead would be filled with challenges far greater than they had ever imagined. Over the next few weeks, Danny and Marcus poured every ounce of their energy into their project. The lab felt like a second home, with its buzzing equipment, towering shelves of gadgets, and walls of whiteboards covered in their notes and calculations. For the first time, they had access to resources they had only dreamed of, but the pressure to deliver was immense. The skeptical man from their first day, Dr. Calder, seemed to make it his mission to challenge them at every turn. He would appear during their brainstorming sessions, offering sarcastic remarks or poking holes in their ideas. "You think a couple of kids with a notebook can solve what entire research teams couldn't?" he scoffed one afternoon, watching as they struggled with a particularly tricky algorithm. Marcus clenched his fists but stayed calm. "We're not just kids with a notebook anymore," he replied firmly, "and we're going to prove it." Meanwhile, Elon Musk's occasional visits became a source of motivation. He would pop into the lab unexpectedly, his presence filling the room with an air of excitement. One evening, he found Danny staring at a prototype that refused to work. "Trouble?" Elon asked casually. Danny sighed, rubbing his temples. "The drone keeps misreading the data. It's like it can't differentiate between real patterns and noise." Elon leaned over, inspecting the setup. "That's not failure," he said, tapping the table lightly. "That's progress disguised as frustration. Keep peeling back the layers, and you'll find the answer." Those words stuck with Danny. They became a mantra for the brothers as they worked late into the night, often fueled by vending machine snacks and sheer determination. But just as they were nearing a breakthrough, the tension between them and Dr. Calder escalated. One day, he stormed into the lab holding a stack of papers. "You call this progress?" he snapped, tossing the papers onto their workstation. "Your calculations are off by a mile. If you launch this, it'll be a disaster." Danny and Marcus froze. Marcus grabbed the papers, his face darkening as he scanned them. "These aren't our calculations," he said slowly. "Someone tampered with our work." Calder folded his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. "Convenient excuse." Danny stepped forward, his voice steady but sharp. "We don't make excuses. We fix problems. And if someone's trying to sabotage us, we'll prove it." Elon walked in at that very moment, catching the tail end of the exchange. His sharp eyes darted between Calder and the brothers. "What's going on here?" Danny explained, laying out the situation. Elon listened intently, his expression unreadable. When they finished, he turned to Calder. "Care to explain?" Calder hesitated, then shrugged. "I'm just ensuring we don't waste resources on amateurs." Elon's gaze hardened. "These amateurs are here because I see potential in them. If you can't support that, then you're in the wrong place." Calder's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more, retreating with a huff. That night, the brothers stayed late, double-checking every detail of their work. Despite the obstacles, their determination only grew. And then, finally, it happened. The breakthrough they had been chasing. The drone worked. It hovered gracefully, its sensors scanning and processing data with precision. The brothers watched in awe as it identified a simulation of early warning signs for an earthquake, a feat no one else had achieved. When Elon arrived the next morning, they demonstrated the drone's capabilities. For the first time, his usually composed face broke into a proud smile. "You've done it," he said, clapping them on the shoulders. "This is just the beginning." But as the brothers celebrated, a shadow loomed over their success. Outside the lab, Calder stood with a phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed tones. "They think they've won," he muttered, "but they have no idea what's coming." And with that, the stage was set for a challenge far greater than they had ever anticipated. A few weeks later, the brothers' invention was unveiled to a select group of investors and tech leaders in a sleek conference room at Musk Innovations. The drone's polished frame glinted under the bright lights as Danny and Marcus prepared for the biggest presentation of their lives. Elon himself introduced them, his voice filled with genuine pride. "These two young men represent the future of innovation," Elon said, gesturing toward them. "What they've created has the potential to save countless lives." The brothers stepped up, their nerves hidden beneath a calm confidence. They demonstrated the drone's capabilities, showing how it could predict natural disasters by analyzing subtle environmental changes. The audience watched in awe as the drone ran live simulations, each result flawless. When the presentation ended, the room erupted into applause. Investors approached them with offers, and reporters clamored to speak to the genius duo. For a moment, it felt like they had truly made it. But not everyone in the room shared the enthusiasm. Dr. Calder lingered in the back, his face unreadable. As the crowd thinned, he approached the brothers, a faint smile curling his lips. "Impressive," he said, his tone dripping with insincerity. Marcus stiffened. "What do you want, Calder?" "Oh, nothing," Calder said casually, pulling a small device from his pocket. "Just thought you'd like to know how easily things can fall apart." Before they could react, Calder pressed a button. The drone, still on display, began to whir uncontrollably. Sparks flew as it spun erratically, crashing into a nearby table. Gasps filled the room as chaos erupted. Danny's heart sank. He rushed to the drone, inspecting the damage. "This isn't a malfunction," he said, his voice shaking. "Someone tampered with it." Calder smirked. "Prove it." But before he could leave, Elon stepped forward. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with intensity. "We don't need to prove anything," Elon said, "because I already know." From the corner of the room, Sarah emerged, holding a small recording device. She played back Calder's earlier conversation, the one he thought was private. His plan, his sabotage, it was all there, clear as day. Calder's smirk vanished, replaced by panic. Security swiftly escorted him out as Elon turned to the brothers. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," he said, "but it's a testament to your character that you persevered." Despite the setback, the brothers refused to give up. They worked tirelessly to repair the drone, and within days, it was better than ever. This time, when they showcased it to the world, nothing went wrong. Their invention quickly gained global recognition. Governments and organizations lined up to implement the technology, and the brothers found themselves at the forefront of a movement that would revolutionize disaster prevention. But through all the success, Danny and Marcus never forgot where they came from. They returned to their neighborhood, using part of their earnings to create programs that gave kids like them access to resources and opportunities. One sunny afternoon, as they watched a group of children experimenting with drones at a local community center, Danny turned to Marcus. "Do you ever think about that day at Taco Bell?" he asked with a grin. Marcus laughed. "Every day. Who knew a single meal could change our lives?" Their journey, filled with twists, challenges, and triumphs, had brought them full circle. And as they looked toward the future, they knew one thing for sure. Their story was just beginning.